Performance enhancing drugs are back in the news this morning. Several sports figures have been identified with a clinic in Florida for supplying these performance enhancing drugs like Lance Armstrong, and we've heard about that in the news here recently. One thing that's bugged me for years is we use these drugs in cattle production. We use them to make cattle grow faster. It's worth 200 pounds of extra weight gain on a steer or a heifer by the time they're ready to go to market. And it's always bugged me that we are so worried as a public about athletes using performance enhancing drugs, but we don't care about those same drugs, those same chemical compounds, and even more aggressive compounds being used in the cattle that produce the beef that we eat.
So Mike, if we are what we eats, and they're pumping these compounds in the cattle to get them to the market quicker, how does that affect our children?
That's a good question. And honestly, the other side, the pharmaceutical companies would tell you there is no data to prove that this has any impact on hormones or steroids or any of the growth that impacts on our kids or that are development and so forth. Well, that's because they haven't done the studies. And I believe more in the precautionary principle. Prove to me it's safe. Well, in the recent book Foodopoly by Winona Howder, that's just now on the bookshelves, she quotes Dr. Samuel Epstein, professor emeritus of environment and occupational medicine at the University of Chicago School of Public Health. The hormones used in beef production are associated with an increased risk of reproductive and childhood cancer. He says that residues of these hormones in meat are up to 20-fold higher than normal.
Wow.
It's in the food. This is simply a huge contradiction when we allow it in our food and don't allow it in our sports and in the athletes that are really cheating through the benefit of the use of these drugs. And we've got athletes from the past. Lyle Alzado. If you go to our blog at Callicrate.com, there's a quote on there from Lyle Alzado where he just wishes one thing before he died at 43 years old, that no one else would die this way. And when Lyle Alzado was playing football for the Raiders and the Denver Broncos, he said in this statement that he made on the website, he says most of the players were using these steroids at the time, and it just made him crazy. And he admits that it made him crazy, but he also died of brain cancer, which he attributed to the use of the steroids.
So what's the answer?
Stop using them. Grow these cattle naturally. The meat's better. The meat is more tender. It's got better quality fat. It's got better marbling in the meat. It's easier to digest. These steroids and these growth enhancing compounds that we're using on these animals are reducing the quality of the meat. And in order to address that, we Kansas City Star talked about blade tenderization in that first segment that they did on beef in December. And because of the use of these performance enhancing drugs on cattle, the meat is less tender. And so they've gone to blade tenderization, which brings on a whole other problem of the bacteria that's on the outside of that meat is now on the inside with the blade tenderization. 32 blades per square inch go down through these big primals, whether it's top butts, ribs, or strips, or whatever it may be, to make the meat more tender and get fewer rejected steaks at the restaurants. But the problem is that the bacteria is now on the inside, and you have to really treat it like hamburger. A lot of people are getting sick eating these blade tenderized steaks.
So is that where the antibiotics come in?
No. The antibiotics really come in more in the industrial model of production, where we're pushing cattle really hard on high grain diets with a very high acid level in that rumen. They need that antibiotic to prevent the bloats, to reduce the acid in their rumens, and to address issues with their liver abscesses as a result of these high acid levels in their rumens. And so that's the purpose of the antibiotics really in at least beef cattle production. It's to keep animals healthier and to keep them from getting sick when they're fed in an environment that's essentially unhealthy.
So the antibiotics actually become part of their diet.
Absolutely, it is a critical component in the diet. If you take that antibiotic out of the diet and the typical finishing diet of a steer in a big industrial kind of a feeding operation, a big percentage of them will not survive.